Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit while I load a little bit of 9mm. Let's talk about this new cartridge coming out now, being produced by Federal, who actually have come out with a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, they were a big part of the 357 SIG coming out, which is a very interesting cartridge, but it's called the 224 Valkyrie. Now that does have a nice ring to it. It does have a nice ring to it, but even though I am an AR guy, even though I am a long-range shooting guy, well, formally, I haven't done any real long-range shooting in a long time. But you would think I would be the first one to say, oh man, that's cool, I want one of those. And I do think it's cool and I do think it's interesting, but I'm not totally enamored with it, and I'll get into why in a minute. Now, there's already people producing firearms that people have, I think they're coming out in something like 8 weeks. Like, people can go ahead and pay $1,000 deposit up front, pay the rest in something like 8 weeks, and then they'll get their firearms. And there's models and stuff put up, and there's some companies putting out some really sharp looking guns. Some really sharp looking firearms with 24 karat gold plated barrels and accessories, like even their takedown pins are 24 karat gold plated and stuff. There's some nice stuff out there. Now, what's up with the cartridge? What's special with it? What they've done is people saying, okay, we got long-range shooters who want to be able to use their AR-15s. They want to be able to use an off-the-shelf AR-15 magazine of some type and shoot really far. Well, what can we do to make a 90 grain, which that is Sierra's Match King, that is the heaviest Match King in a 22 caliber. All right, highest ballistic coefficient means it's the most aerodynamic. You need that for 1,000-yard shooting. You need that. So they're like, what can we do to build a cartridge to get those numbers up? Because Nosler tried it with their 22 Nosler, and a lot of companies cut barrels for it. Nosler's got their proprietary brass. The problem they ran into, Nosler said, okay, what can we do to make the biggest case capacity? And they made one, I believe it still uses a 5.56 or 223 bolt. I believe it does. I could be wrong. I do believe that's what the head on it is. But they made the biggest case capacity possible, trying to get the most case volume that they could put behind a 22 caliber bullet and still fit it standard magazine length. And that includes bringing the shoulder way up. Well, the problem they ran into is that they still couldn't get that cartridge to run. It doesn't run the 90 grains. They're still stuck with like the 69 and 75 and 77 grains like the 223 has. And it performs okay. It definitely is more velocity than a 223, at least in those particular grain weights. But Federal said, okay, we can beat that. And said, okay, what's made this Grendel cartridge so successful? What can we do to take this Wildcat that the 6.5 Grendel that Alexander Arms came out with? Why has it been so successful as a long-range cartridge? It's a slightly smaller case capacity than the 6.8. And they took the same idea and said, okay, they wanted to stick in that military range, that 6.5 to 7mm that the military has said they know is ideal for sniping or shooting out at long distance in terms of balancing accuracy with terminal ballistics and basically killing people. And they said, okay, well, we can basically take a 7.62 by 39 because it's a shorter cartridge, and we can stick a longer bullet in there and make it magazine length because we've made a shorter, fatter cartridge. It's a shorter and fatter cartridge than the 6.8, pushing a similar diameter bullet, hair smaller, but they're running those big heavy pills with those high ballistic coefficients. That allowed the 6.5 Grendel to be a legitimate 1,000-yard contender coming out of an AR platform. But all these people said, no. What can we do to go with a more standardized size? What can we do to make sure the pressure is good and take that same idea and we can shoot a 22 caliber bullet? And they more or less took, I guess, the 30 Remington or 6.8 SBC. The 6.8 was based off the 30 Remington. They shortened it down. Because that's where the 6.8 messed up. That is where the 6.8 made its boo-boo when it was designed by the Army Marksmanship Unit. They made it too long. you have to run to get the all give and everything. I know I said that wrong. To match correctly, you have to run a lightweight bullet. It doesn't give you a lot of aerodynamics. You don't have that long streamlined bullet. It ended up being a fantastic 300-yard cartridge. I mean, the 6.8 is a beast at 300 yards compared to just about anything else out there for the AR platform. But they made it too long and said, okay, let's take a similar design cartridge. We're going to shorten it up. Why? People are like, you lose case capacity. Yeah, you lose case capacity, but you can run a longer bullet and still have it seat correctly without getting off the bearing surface of the bullet with the neck of the cartridge, so you can run a much longer bullet and fit it inside of a magazine of the same length. It incidentally, I believe it's running off the 6.8 magazines and the 6.8 bolt carriers. That's what the Valkyrie's going to run, but it's running that 22 caliber bullet, and they are loading it. The factory loads Federal is making are 90 grain Sierra Match Kings. Got to remember, the designated marksman round, even in the military, is only a 77 for their 5.56 for the SPR. The ballistics they're citing, you guys do the ballistic coefficient math, that bullet has a drop rate similar to the 6.5 Creedmoor out at 1,000 yards. In other words, it outshoots the 6.5 Grendel in terms of energy, wind drift drop, coming out of an AR-15 platform, because they're pushing that 90 grain Sierra Match King 2,700 feet per second. And that looks pretty impressive, because a lot of us are like, oh man, that's pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of 77 grains that we're only pushing 2,700. Some of them do 2,600 and you buy them with factory match ammo. That's running a 90 grain. And people need to understand, when you're dealing with calibers as small as a 22 caliber, a 13 grain weight increase is an enormous ballistic coefficient difference. It's an enormous aerodynamic difference. That is absolutely massive. That is effectively adding 300 yards of effective range to a 223 caliber bullet by being able to run that ballistic coefficient at the similar velocities. And that looks good, and people say, man, that's amazing, 2,700. Well, here's the problem. They took all that and said, how can we innovate a new caliber? Anyone who follows all the different groups and people who are doing things in long-range shooting, guys are almost doing that with the 223 with hand loads. You say, what? Yeah. There are a few guys out there who've already done this. They've documented their various loads and their load data and what they're doing. And there are guys who are taking AR-15s, running a 90 grain Sierra Match King, and they are pushing them out to almost those velocities. There are guys who are hitting 2,600 and 2,650, pushing that same bullet with a 223. See where we're getting into a problem? If someone really wanted to do some long-range shooting with an AR-15, they're going to save money going that route. And they're going to have a rifle that will fire their standard cheap 223 and 5.56 if they so choose. That's the problem. See, they're not having to do a caliber conversion. The guys who are doing it are saying, okay, what's our problem? Our problem is we can't fit it in the magazine, right? Well, what happens if we do run some slightly modified magazines and we enlarge the magwell slightly? Lengthen the magwell. As long as we make sure our feed ramps and stuff are polished enough, we can run a magazine that's a 1/10 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch longer after we've modified some stuff, right? Than standard magazine length. Because standard magazine length is 2.25 inches in the 223, or for the ARs. Guys who are willing to expand a magazine that goes to 2.4 inches. You know, you're adding about an 1/8 of an inch. That 1/8 of an inch lets you seat a 90 grain in a 223 cartridge like a Lapua cartridge or something. There are guys doing it. There are guys shooting sub-MOA who have magazine feedable AR-15s that are pushing those sort of velocities, and they're pushing those bullets out to 1,000 yards in a 1 MOA rifle that will feed from a magazine. It's already being done. It's being done by innovative hand loaders and gun modifiers. So that's kind of the problem, is that we are now talking about running a new cartridge yet again. Guys, we've got a lot of AR-15 cartridges now that the industry's coming out with, and I'm not saying it's not a good idea. It's actually a brilliant way to tackle it. They're tackling it the same direction that the 6.5 Grendel did, but it's a bigger company. Federal's a big company. I mean, Alexander Arms isn't tiny, but they're nowhere near the size of Federal. Federal's going to market it and push it, and yeah, it's going to be a fine cartridge, but it's not really doing much more than people have been able to get out of the 223. Now, why aren't they going to go that route? Because I had to think about that. I'm like, well, if guys are already doing this, why isn't Federal just saying we could just load these longer bullets and we could sell special magazines that we've already purpose built, and a slightly mag wells that we basically taken a file to and shaved some extra metal out of so they'll fit. Not that much metal is needed to be removed from a mag well for people to run thinner wall magazines in there, because a lot of it has to do with what sort of materials you make a mag out of, like and what modifications you're willing to make. It's not that difficult of a process. Most of the modifications in the magazine, it's very little in the mag well that you can't do without just a simple hand file. So the problem is they can't do that. You know why? Because they'll be calling it a 223 bullet. They'll be calling it a 223. Well, it won't fit in a standard AR-15 magazine. That means it is outside of spec. And this is, one of the interesting things we run into. We need standards, we need SAMI, we need all this stuff. But SAMI specs give you certain specifications on a cartridge. And some of that includes links and everything else. So the problem is if they go ahead and they make these bullets, a simple bullet is 1/8 of an inch longer than this, and it won't fit into 90% to 99% of the weapon systems chambered in that caliber, we now have a problem with the labeling of the cartridge. So our issue runs into labeling, and ignorance is going to prevent people from being able to do this, or them just being able to say, look, we can do 2650 instead of 2700, and just keep it at 223 and just seat the bullet more shallow, crimp it down, and just run a modified magazine and magwell. Problem solved. This will run right into AR-15s with the right barrel, with a good barrel, the proper barrel. And a lot of that has to do with, when I say a proper barrel, I do mean a proper barrel, where you've got to start looking at throat lengths and stuff like that, because if you really want to make that bullet run, again, that bullet's got a longer give on it. You can get too far off the lands with the wrong rifling. So that could make it precarious for the 5.56, and even the 223 Wild in some cases, as far as getting your ideal accuracy. And I suppose at least if they're running their own new caliber, they can set those standards for the throat and everything in the barrel to specifically match this sort of bullet with what they want to do. They can control the standards. And it allows for that for a mass-produced weapon. But what people need to remember, there are people modifying their ARs and who are shooting 223 to almost this performance level right now. Already been doing it. Who document their results, who show their load data. It's out there. So while it looks really impressive, people need to understand it's not particularly impressive when you consider how much case volume they added to this cartridge in order to replicate a feat that is almost being done, like very, very close to being done right now with the 223. And the only real advantage is not going to come from those factory loadings when people do it. It's going to be coming from people who say, you know what, 2700 in the safe pressure, I bet I can do 2900 with that same bullet. There are going to be handlers who are going to tune this down the way they want it. But the thing is, that's the argument being made. If someone really wants this level of performance, they don't necessarily need a new cartridge. They need to go back and fine-tune their 223 builds. It'll cost them a lot less money. You're going to get much, much cheaper brass, and you're going to be still able to run the normal stuff. You're going to have a weapon system that's more compatible with what already exists with one of the most common calibers in the world already. So that's why I'm not totally enamored with it. Part of me looks at it and goes, oh man, 224 Valkyrie. Damn. Damn. And you see some of the rifles. I mean, some of the rifles so far, like one of them, like 24 karat gold plating. I don't even remember the name of the company, like Airborne Arms or something. It's a slick looking rig. Piston driven, 24 karat gold. It's slick. I'm not going to lie, that is a nice looking gun. But from a practicality perspective, this can already be achieved without adding this enormous amount of case volume, fewer rounds being able to be put in a magazine, all this other stuff. Probably, I'm going to guess, shorter barrel lives. That's always what happens when you take the same caliber and you add case capacity, you cut barrel life. There's a reason the 308 barrels last so long, for example, versus 6.5 Creedmoors and 6 Creedmoors and 243s. There's a reason for that. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.